Today is our final installment of our garden design series, and we've saved the best for last, dwarf conifers. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart in Georgia.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Now more than ever, our homes are our havens, where we learn, love, and live. Let garden projects, inspired or simple, bring beauty and comfort to you. Wherever you choose to plant good, we're with you.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
Treat watching the birth and growth of the Inspiration Garden at Gibbs Gardens. It's a rare opportunity to see the whole process unfold and learn from one of the nation's most talented garden designers, Jim Gibbs. Jim's passion for plants is evident in every aspect of his work, and his commitment to delivering a world-class experience to every visitor is an important part of his legacy as a designer and a plantsman. He has graciously shared his lifetime of experience with us, and we've seen his vision for the Inspiration Garden turn into a reality. One of the true stars of this garden are the dwarf conifers that provide year-round interest and an incredible range of diversity. Let's join Jim as we take a closer look at this amazing collection. Jim, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. It's nice to be back again.
Wonderful. Today we're talking about the amazing world of dwarf conifers, and of course you have just finished part of the installation of an amazing collection of dwarf conifers, and I want you to talk about why dwarf conifers.
Well, dwarf conifers, of course, offer the evergreens for gardening in the winter time. So in the winter, when there's no leaves on any of the trees, you can look at this garden and people will love to come and walk in this garden. It's just exciting. Now, even if I plan the Japanese garden, which I did, it's been in for probably 25 years. The first thing I did was decide what evergreens I would put in the garden. Pinus parviflora is a blue-green sort of color, and it has short needles and it works well for bonsai. So the first thing I did was position those where I want them in the garden. Everything started with that evergreen, and then I worked in more evergreens. In a conifer garden, you have such a huge selection of dwarf conifers, and you can add the companion plants to it and make it more exciting. So it was to give me a garden, a plant collection that would create enough interest in the winter that people would want to come to Gibbs Gardens just to see the conifer garden. So we're, of course, a public garden, so we want to feature plant collections. So this is a great plant collection for people to come and study, and then they can Google and check out the plants they like best and find out more about them.
Evergreens are so important to the structure of any garden, and if you ever see a garden or a plant collection that doesn't have an ample representation of evergreens, it's not a year-round garden, or it can look very, very barren in the winter. So to your point, one of the huge advantages in featuring evergreens is that this is truly a year-round garden. And also, as we think about dwarf conifers, with as many selections as you have here, if you had gone with full-size conifers, it would have taken 5 times the amount of space, and also it can be very difficult to show off the individual selections, to compose them in a way to where people actually really get to see what you have planted.
Well, of course, the conifers too are the bones of the garden. They hold the structure of the garden together. And I think the main thing to think about is we've got trees that are 60, 80 feet, almost 100 feet tall conifers. Well, if you put 3 of those in an area, that's all you could get in the space. Here on an acre and a half, we have over 200 named cultivars. So these varieties, named varieties, you've got to think about your space. In residential landscape design, a dwarf conifer is going to be much better in that garden for size and scale than to go with something like a ball cypress or a dawn redwood that's going to be 80 to 100 feet tall. So we got to think about size and space.
Right, absolutely. I know we don't have time for you to walk through all 200 selections that you have here, but give us just a bit of an overview, like a 30,000 foot look at, you know, the breadth of what's planted here.
The great majority of conifers, the generic names would be the genus of each of these plants. Just to give you an example, you have so many different named varieties, cultivars of pine. That's in the genus Pinus. Now you have the spruce, and you have so many of the spruce, dwarf spruce I'm talking about, which come from the big huge spruce, and those are the Picea. And then you have the fir, which are the Abes. But then to go on down, you have hemlock, which everybody knows about.
Right.
So think about big, tall hemlocks. Right over here next to you are little dwarf hemlocks that don't get any taller than 3 feet high. So we have junipers, which most people are familiar with. They're in the conifer family, and they're more prostrate, they spread more. And we have the cypress, we have the yews, many yews, great yews to use, and we have podocarpus. What I would suggest is go back to your computer, go to Google, and put those in, and you're going to be able to select the ones you like for the form, for the texture, and the color. That's what's important to plan for any conifer garden. You've got to think of those all 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this is a wonderful collection. It offers the viewer an exciting opportunity to be able to see all these broader categories. Could you let me know what some of your favorites are, you know, of this whole collection? Which ones are you most excited about?
But I like to mix them up. There's so many pines, Pinus. You've got the sort of globe-shaped. You've got some pines that are very twisted and gnarled. You've got interesting growth characteristics in pines. The spruce, it actually comes up and hangs, and it's very graceful. So it's just the selection of all the shapes and forms and colors that make a conifer garden interesting. This garden really pops. It comes out, and everybody is going to want to go to the dwarf conifer garden.
One of the most important components to having success in gardening is selecting the right plant for the right place. And this was a tremendous endeavor, putting all of this together for you, I'm sure. And there's a lot of thought that had to go into making sure that this collection was well curated. I want you to talk us through the process. What did you do to make sure that you were selecting the right group of plants?
Well, Eric, as you know, I've been designing and installing landscapes for over 50 years. Even though I have the experience, I have a lot of knowledge, you still need to gain more knowledge. And on dwarf conifers, I knew that I did not have enough knowledge for the selection I wanted for over 200 varieties of plants. So the first thing I thought, I've got to find out who is the best person that I can talk to come up with the list that will of course grow in zone 7 and 8. That's the zone I'm in. Now if you're in zone 5 or 6 or 4, you want to be thinking about what will grow in that zone. In our area, we're warmer in the summers and most of these plants come from the Portland, Oregon area, which is an ideal place to grow conifers. But I thought, well, I don't want to just start looking at plants either. I want to go to a person that's grown conifers.
Right.
So Tom Cox, who is a dendrologist and an expert on conifers, I asked Tom to consult with me. I said, I want you to help me come up with the selection of all of these plants, and then I will take that selection and I'll work them into the garden depending on their sun requirements, or do they need full sun, or do they need part sun, or do they need part shade. But help me with the list. So Tom knows what will live and not live in Georgia, and especially in zone 7 and 8. He only lives about 15 minutes from here.
Right.
So he has a huge collection, like over 4,000 conifers in his gardens. So he came up with a list, and I started working from that list. Most plants today have a tag like this on them, and this would have a picture of this dwarf conifer, and the picture says Catherine Elizabeth, Japanese white pine. The common name is Japanese white pine, and the cultivar is Catherine Elizabeth. If you turn this over, this little triangular tag, on the other side gives you the information you need to select plants. It says Catherine Elizabeth, and it says Japanese white pine, and then under it gives you the botanical name. So it's Pinus parviflora, Catherine Elizabeth. So you would go to your computer, put Pinus parviflora, Catherine Elizabeth in, and you're going to see all kinds of pictures about small ones that are probably 3 gallon, a 5 gallon, 20 gallon, or whatever. Now, if you look below, it'll also say the growth habit. It is a globe shape. Then under that, it gives you the growth rate. This little plant only grows 1 to 3 inches per year. That's all. Now under that, it says the garden rate. Well, for a garden, in 10 years, this plant is only going to be 2 feet high times 2 feet wide. So if you bought 3 plants, you got to make sure, even though they're small when you buy them, you put them at least 2 feet apart. That's 2 feet on center, which is from the center of one plant to the center of the next plant. And in 10 years, you'll form a grouping of these 3 plants coming together. Now, of course, if you want to speed the process up, you pay more money and you get bigger plants.
Right.
But if you go with a 3 gallon, it would take that long. Now, the next thing you've got to think about, well, I just mentioned we're in zone 7 and 8. We've got to think about freezing here. This plant, most conifers too, will go to very cold temperatures. This plant would go minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So you don't really worry about the conifers much freezing. You got to think more about the sun in the south. Sunlight, you want to check, but this plant has to have full sun. If you put it in shade, it will die. If you even put it in part sun, it's not going to perform well. So you've got to look at that and look at your site. You've got to think about, do I have a full sun section, which is right here? Every plant I plant in this section has full sun. If I put anything else in there, it's going to die. Now, if I go over to that side, that's part sun. Full sun means that you need 6 hours or more per day of sunlight. Part sun is saying it needs 4 to 6 hours per day. Now, if you want to go to part shade, you're going to need to get into more of a 4 to 6 hours of filtered sunlight, because it's got to be filtered high trees to let light in. So you've got to think about the light requirements. It's very important. I can't stress enough light requirements, and also the zone you live in. Look at the tag, and most garden centers will let you, probably, they have some extras, they'll let you take one of these home. But then take these and put them on the ground, play with them, and just know that this plant represents here, this plant represents this, and you could go in and put 4 to 6 plants together and you come up. But selection of plants is very, very important, and we have to study it. Remember, research, knowledge, there's nothing like gaining knowledge on plant material, but you've got to go to your books and to the internet and check everything out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, public gardens are a wonderful resource. I love going to the public gardens that are like Gibbs Gardens that are in my backyard, because a lot of the heavy lifting and the hard work of that research you've already done. Jim, let's talk now about grouping plants and what we need to bear in mind. For me, this is the creative, fun part, but also sometimes it can be daunting. And I can imagine when you had 200 different selections moved in, figuring it all out, it's a very important part of making this garden work the way you want it to.
This is such a difficult part of the process. And what I find is easier to do is you want to group in 4 to 6 plants depending on the sun requirements. You got to think about that, the sun requirements. So those 4 to 6 plants, if you're in a full sun area, have to be able to take full sun. If it's part sun, you go to part sun or part shade. Now what we did is we unloaded the trailers. We had 2 trailers of dwarf conifers come in from the Portland, Oregon area. And we unloaded those in a parking lot because the trailers were so large. We had to then transfer those to an area close to the dwarf conifer garden that was level and flat. And I knew I was going to have to set up a holding area so that I could get my notes together and go out and look at all the plants and put first all the plants that needed full sun in one area. Then I put in another area the ones that wanted part sun. And I put in another area all the plants that wanted part shade. Now what I did then was to start grouping 4 to 6 plants in full sun that first of all had interesting form, texture, and color. So that's the most important thing to do in the group of 4 to 6 plants, is to create those different greens and the different shapes that work together well. Then I knew once I started moving those groups to the garden, which is we're standing in groupings. As I moved them over, I could take the 4 to 6 plants, plant them, and go by how far to plant on center each plant. And you have to do that because you got to realize these plants are going to grow a certain height and spread in 10 years. So once I did that, we just sort of started putting the groups together. But by putting them all out there first and looking at your colors, you can arrange easier. You don't want to plant them and then have to dig them up and move them all around.
Right.
So if you look at where we're standing, you're seeing lots of groups of 4 to 6 plants just planted next to each other according to the space they should be grown. You have all these fabulous forms that come together. You have all of these different colors, and you have all of these textures. I mean, right where we're standing, look at this feathery blue-gray texture over here, and then the chartreuse green texture of this, the dark green hanging of the fur over there. You've got the dissecta maples, which are companion plants to give fall color and interesting texture. Right next to you is a dwarf ginkgo, which will be turning yellow in about a week. So it just gives you all this wonderful texture everywhere. But look at this hillside. It's nothing but groupings of 4 to 6 plants, and they're next to each other. You don't have to worry so much if you've done your studying and you've thought about it and thought the process through and made sure each group works. You can almost take them then and put them in sight, and that's what I did.
Well, doing that thoughtfully, it allows each plant to really have its ability to shine. You know, if we planted all the chartreuse plants together, they tend to blend in, obviously. If we plant a bunch of plants together with all the same texture, it starts to look a bit monochromatic. But using the juxtaposition, the contrast between this blue-green foliage and this chartreuse, it actually accentuates both of them. It brings both of them more into the forefront and allows them their moment in the sun. Jim, one of the wonderful things about dwarf conifers is that they are pretty low maintenance, and I think that should make them very appealing to most gardeners. Very few of us are looking for super high maintenance plants for our garden. Are there any considerations, anything we should be thinking about as far as care and maintenance goes?
Well, of course, what you said is so true. The cost of maintenance is going up every year because the labor costs are going up. So people want to avoid all those high labor costs. One of the reasons I wanted the dwarf conifers is you have very, very little pruning necessary because they are dwarf plants, and as they continue to grow, they grow into their natural forms, and their shapes, so you don't want to destroy that. So there's very, very minimum amount of pruning. So that's the big cost you cut out. Now, after you do that, you look around and you think, well, how often do you fertilize? Twice a year is all you have to fertilize. You use a slow release fertilizer.
Right.
You're giving nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium to the plants a little bit each week, and you're keeping them a nice green, the nice color that you want. And then you think about diseases. You mainly are dealing with more of fungus, and you've got to watch any fungus. You spray with a fungicide to kill the fungus.
Right.
If you have insects, which you sort of know which plants have certain insects that are attracted to them, and you're on the lookout for that. But you want to think about identifying the insect and just spray it with an insecticide. Insecticide means to kill insects. The maintenance is one of the reasons I love the conifer garden. It's very, very low maintenance. I wish I could be here years from now to see this mature like you're going to see it. You're going to see years later all these plants coming together in the different shapes and forms and the colors and all that. We don't want to destroy that. We just want to have more time and experience over the time, the beauty of plants, and they become sculptures. These are living sculptures, and we're going to have them scattered all over these hills, and that's going to be a great time to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've done such a phenomenal job, and I can't wait to come back and visit this garden every year and kind of grow with it and see it growing into its own and becoming this beautiful thing that we know it already is.
Well, we want you back, and we want other people too. Yeah. We're a public garden, so visit often and check out the plants you like, and then you can buy those plants and put them in your garden. Remember again, these are evergreens, so they give year-round interest. You're going to always have interest with the evergreens.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you so much. I've had such a wonderful afternoon. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to see you again too.
Each week we travel the country north to south, east to west, visiting some of the most exciting gardens, as well as talking to industry horticulturalists about design principles, new plants, and also how you can be most successful with your home gardens. We also love answering your gardening questions, so visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Now more than ever, our homes are our havens, where we learn, love, and live. Let garden projects, inspired or simple, bring beauty and comfort to you. Wherever you choose to plant good, we're with you.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The Ep6, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
What an amazing journey it's been watching the Inspiration Garden come to life and learning from a pro how to find success in our own gardens. If you have questions, you can visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.